I'm joined today by the very wonderful Sarah Walker, who's going to introduce themselves in a moment. This is another series or another episode in a series of conversations with people who are clients of Soul Trained. Sarah, for the benefit of the people tuning in, who are you and what do you do?
God, who are you is quite a deep question, isn't it? On a very surface level. I'm Sarah, pronouns she, her, hers. I lead corporate strategy for a media company. The context in which I know you and Soul Trained has been that I worked with you at that company and have started working with you as a coach as you've set up your own business outside of that company. So interesting kind of overlap.
Why did you decide to work with me as your coach?
So it was an interesting kind of combination of factors, because I had previously started to work with an external coach to the company I actually initially started looking at coaching for help around specific situations and dealing with specific kind of circumstances that I wanted some very tactical help in talking through how to approach particular types of meetings I had to have or particular types of projects I was needing to lead. And I started working with an external coach, and maybe a couple of months in, suddenly found myself in a position where I was applying for, interviewing, and then eventually kind of in a complicated way, taking on a very, very different role in the company than the one that I had previously been doing. And as part of that, I suddenly found myself joining the kind of C-suite of the company that I had previously worked at in a more junior role, and having to go through that transition of what that meant for dealing with new people, new situations, but also dealing with old people and old situations in a new way.
Right.
And we started ending up talking around you helping me with that transition into that role, and then have continued working together since.
Thank you. And over the time that we have worked together and are continuing to work together, I wonder, you don't have to spill your deepest, darkest secrets here.
It'd be very disappointing.
I wonder if you would be open to kind of sharing some of the shifts that you've experienced as a leader as a result of our work together.
Yeah. And for me, I think the one thing that really stands out from just the whole experience of going through the process of having a coach, understanding what a coach can help you do, help you deliver, particularly as distinct from someone like a mentor or an advisor that's going to give you specific information, was just the importance of really spending time understanding your style and then finding ways to work with it, and recognizing in situations why things don't feel right, why things feel difficult or like they're taking a lot of energy, and just being able to identify when that is because it rubs up against the way in which you would naturally do something.
What I'm hearing you describe, Sarah, is that moment that a leader is at an inflection point in their career where they may have taken on a bigger, broader role with greater decision-making accountability, maybe taken on responsibilities, but found themselves kind of like in the eye of the storm of their own personal change. And the idea around, the idea of what got me here isn't going to get me there. So what aspects of my recipe of success, quote unquote, do I want to keep, and what aspects do I want to shed so that I can welcome in new behaviors, new values, new beliefs, so that I can be successful in this new iteration of me at this inflection point that I'm at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think making that a much more considered part of this transition of role than it ever has been when I've done it before.
Right.
And obviously it always happens as you become more senior, you transition to a different role. But I think it feels like it has been able to happen a lot more quickly and deliberately because of the time I've taken to focus on it, as opposed to having it sort of happen by trial and error as you realize gradually which situations don't work as well, what beliefs were previously limiting, etc. It's been refreshing to have it as something that you spent time working on, as opposed to just hoped happened in the background.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Soul Train's coaching process is underpinned by two core beliefs. The first one is that leadership is a behavior, not a title. And that the second one is that those shifts that you have been talking about, shift happens through hard human kindness. I wonder, I don't know if I've ever shared those two beliefs.
I'm not sure I've ever heard the phrase hard human kindness.
Trademark. Okay. Hashtag made it up. Would be curious to hear whether, in reflection, knowing that you haven't necessarily heard those two things from me before, I wonder if just initial thoughts on how you've seen those two beliefs show up in our coaching process in any way.
It's interesting. I think definitely the leadership being a behavior, not a title thing is, there's an element of you interpret that as obviously just because you've been given a more senior title, that's not enough. You need to behave in a different way. Mm-hmm. But there's the flip side of it as well, which is that actually, because you are now in a different position, what is expected of you is a difference in your behavior as much as it is a difference in what you're doing and who you're doing it. It's how you do the same things. Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked a lot over the last kind of year, 18 months around finding myself in exactly the same situations with the same people and having to take on a different way of being in those situations. Mm-hmm. So in people that were my peers, that my natural instinct would be to default to the relationship and behaviors that we previously would have had, is actually having to make quite a conscious effort to change that dynamic now to get the best out of it for the role that I'm in and the kind of wider responsibility. So I think that has definitely been a sort of recurrent theme in making, again, more considered decisions about how your behavior impacts how people perceive you as a leader, but also vice versa. Hard human kindness, I'm assuming I think I know what you mean. We've had a lot of discussions, I think particularly around the world of feedback and taking and giving feedback, which is that for me, there's been a really important extra layer added to that process as a result of our conversations around feedback being someone else's experience of something that comes with it. When feedback is given, it comes with it all their perspectives and their interpretations of how something played out and happened that shouldn't necessarily be either completely ignored or completely taken as whole truth. And I think often you have difficult conversations as a result of that, which is sometimes my tendency was always to take feedback as something I have to fix about myself.
Yep.
Really, and just perceive it as a character flaw that needs to be fixed. And there's a degree of actually understanding when it is right to want to try and fix something and to kind of please the person giving that feedback, so you're changing your behavior to fit them, and when it isn't, when actually it's better to have a conversation about the fact that the thing that they perceive to be the problem isn't necessarily going to change, which is not always the easiest thing to do, but it usually is the most beneficial in the long run.
Mm-hmm. I did not know that you had gotten that from our work together. I'm delighted.
I don't know what you're intending to mean by hard human kindness. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer was great. Some final thoughts, Sarah, for the people tuning into this. For those leaders out there that might be considering working with a coach, any advice or thoughts that you would like to share with them about that might help them to make their decision?
I would say don't expect that you necessarily have a massive thing that you need to be fixed by a coach. So the value in the coaching relationships that I've had has not come from going with a plan of I want to get from state A to state B and I need to be able to do it and I need help getting there. It's actually come from understanding how those long-term things that you're working on interact with situations that come up day to day, or in the case of like taking on this new role, completely out of the blue. And that's where it feels to me like it's provided the most value for me, is having someone who knows you, knows your style, to be able to talk through specific situations with in advance, to prepare for them, to understand the implications of things going in different directions or going well or badly, so that when you have those situations in real life, they're not a surprise or a shock, and you're able to make more conscious choices about how they play out and how you react to them, rather than having some grand plan of I need a coach to help me achieve X or to get to like whatever level by a certain point.
Really hearing the idea in there about the relationship is important and fundamental to the benefits that one would derive from coaching. So work with a coach that you feel like you can work with.
Work with a coach that you don't dread joining a conversation with if you haven't got anything specific that you've been storing up.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to get more out of coaching sessions if there are things to work on, but you don't want to work with someone where you dial into the call or, heaven forbid, meet them face to face and think, oh God, I don't know what I'm asking about now and I don't know how it's going to go. Find a coach that you would be happy just talking to about anything. You're going to get more out of that relationship in talking about the things that matter.
I think about some of our conversations, Sarah, which I know you won't mind me sharing this, and I'm not going to break any confidences, but I think about some of those conversations where you've turned up on the screen and you're like, well, DDS, I don't know what I want to talk about today. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And they've ended up being some of the most rich and potent conversations that I think we've had in our relationship together.
And it's often because the reason I don't know what I want to talk about is because I haven't had the time or the opportunity to reflect on things. And just joining that conversation gives you that time because you've earmarked it for this. And in the process of that conversation, often things just emerge that you probably would have thought of anyway if you'd given it the time in advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I think about hard human kindness, I think about many things, including, holding up the mirror or tough love or whatever. But I also think about the idea around, I want to meet you where you are, right? And if that means that you show up to me and say, I don't know what to talk about, I'm like, okay, well then let's just give that some space. Let's give it some space, and we're here to talk about something. So let's talk about something. But it's that kind of alchemy almost of allowing the not knowingness to be filled with a space of genesis rather than panic and worry that you haven't got anything to talk about. Yeah. Well, Sarah, I thank you. Thank you for being here and for sharing your thoughts and your process so openly. Just for the record, I too don't dread coming to see you.
And that's probably the nicest thing anyone's going to say to me today with the way the rest of the day has gone.
All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you.